Hi, how you doing? Justin here. Today I'm going to be talking to you about how to learn a jazz standard. Now this is pretty important. You know, I'm about to start doing a series of lessons on jazz standards, but I don't want to have to go through the same stuff every time, right? And if you've got a little method to follow each time you learn a new tune, it's a really good idea. You will find other people who'll tell you about other methods, and that's probably fine too, but I think having a method will help you learn the tunes a lot faster. And this is the method I've used, and a lot of it came from jazz guitar players and jazz musicians a lot better than me. So I think it's a pretty good approach. It's been working for me, and I'm sure it's worked for many others. So the first thing when you're going to learn a new jazz standard is to listen to it. Okay, now this is a really big deal, and it's a massive mistake that I made when I first started getting into jazz. I bought a real book, so I had all of the chords and the melodies written out in a book. So I sat down and tried to learn them from the book. And it kind of worked, like I could kind of play them, but I didn't really know how the songs go. I didn't know what it was supposed to sound like. So I really, really recommend, if you're going to learn Autumn Leaves, that you look up some versions of Autumn Leaves. Get onto iTunes and find a whole bunch of different people playing Autumn Leaves and listen to it, so you know what the melody sounds like, what the different kind of feels are, that it can be played kind of acoustically like the Eva Cassidy thing, or it can be a swing version, or it can be really fast or really slow. It can be and you need to learn the melody. You really have to hear that melody. And as a little 1B would be to try and find a vocal version. Right? If you can, see if you can find one with a singer singing the words, because I really think it helps you learn the melody, and it makes sense of when you're hearing an instrumental version of it. Usually they'll be playing the melody, even if it's, if it's on a saxophone or a guitar, they'll be playing it in a way that it's kind of singing and it's speaking the words. They're not adding too many extra syllables, and I think that's a mistake people often make when they're an instrumental player. They play the melody in a way that doesn't sound very vocal, and it kind of takes away something from the song. So I think if you can find, when you pick your new tune, no matter what it is, make sure you try and find a vocal version if there's one available. I mean, you're not going to find a vocal version of Oleo, right, or Giant Steps. Or maybe I've got a feeling somebody showed me a vocal version of Giant Steps. But anyway, wasn't written for a vocal. Try and find one if you can. It's a really good idea, and listen to lots of them. Before I learn a new tune, a new jazz standard, if somebody says, hey man, you want to check out this tune, it's a really good one, then I'll get on iTunes and I'll buy 20 different versions of the song, and I'll listen to them over and over again, probably a week before I even start trying to play the song. Just to really make sure I've got the melody in my head right. So you have to go that extreme, but at least go and listen to a few different versions. On YouTube now you can type in the name of a song and you'll get 20 different versions straight away, so I think that's a really good idea. You want to check out some versions first. If you're using my website, I'm going to give you recommended versions as well of each of the standards that I'm teaching, and saying here's the 4 or 5 versions that I really like, and give you some links to go and check them out as well, because that's a pretty big deal, is listening to what you're going to play before you try and play it. Music is about sound, right? It's not about reading. It's not about how well you can read a jazz chart. It's about absorbing the music and copying the feel and all of that. It's really important, and it was I'm just emphasizing it because I made that mistake, and it really, I would have learned jazz so much better and so much faster if I'd actually listened to it before I started trying to play it. So I don't want you to make the same mistakes I did. Okay, the second thing you want to do, get yourself your real book out and learn the chords. Now, later on, more advanced players probably won't be using a real book to figure out the chords. They'll be learning them by ear, by listening to the song. But when you're starting out, if you're a beginner, don't feel ashamed to be using the real book. Pretty much everyone does, okay? So you're learning your tune, you're doing all the things you are or whatever, and you open up those things and you learn the chords and try and learn the order of the chords, okay? Just sit down and play them real slow. Don't be in a hurry. Just try and play through the tune really slowly. Get your chords together. One thing that I used to do is quite helpful is to take the time away and just look at the order of the chords. That can be quite helpful when you're trying to remember the order of them. Literally just write out the chords, all of the chords in the song, but without any of the bars and without any of the time changes, and just sit there practicing them. It kind of gets your hand into the feeling of moving between the chords. But I also recommend playing them in time as well, because it helps you kind of get used to the harmonic kind of flavor of the song. So playing it through in time, but just just nice and slowly. You know, if you want some extra practice getting through those changes, take away the time and just write the chords out, practice, you know, that'll help you get your fingers used to the changes. But, you know, you want to make sure that you're doing a bit of listening at that point as well, and really hearing the sound of the changes in their most basic form, because later you're going to be playing around with it quite a lot. So yeah, learn those chords. If you can, try and memorize them. Okay, so a lot of people get stuck playing with the real book, and they have to have the real book open to be able to play a song. And you know, I don't think that's a great idea. You know, the real book's fine for learning a song, but I think you want to try and get it, you know, in your head as soon as you can. So try and memorize it. Jazz tunes are a little bit more awkward than, you know, your standard 3-chord pop song, so you might find it a little bit more difficult, in which case keep the book open for a while. But bear in mind that long term you don't want to be having the book open. You want to get it into your memory properly. And once you've done that, you want to start checking out the melody. Now, if you read music, if you can read notation, then you'll be able to read the notation directly off the standard. If you can't, you're going to either have to find a video lesson of somebody teaching you the melody, or really the best way to do it is to learn the melody off a record, okay? And even still, I might use a chart for getting the chords to a song if I can't figure them out very quickly, but generally with a melody, I'll learn it off a record straight away, because they tend to play it slightly differently than the real book. It's a bit, it's usually written a bit exact, and I usually prefer vocal versions. If I can find one by Sarah Vaughan or Ella Fitzgerald or Julie London or someone like that, a great girl singer, then I'll probably learn the melody off them rather than the one off the real book. But you know, if you, regardless of whether you get one from the book or whether you transcribe it, the thing that I'd recommend with the melody is learning it in one spot really well. Okay, so eventually you want to be able to play that melody in any octave all over the fingerboard straight away. But to start off with, you want to really make sure that you can play one melody really well, because again, if you go to a jam session or something, or you're playing with your buddy, you don't want to be fumbling around the melody all over the neck. You want one place where you can play it confidently, you know, and then if you want to go trying to play somewhere else, you can, but if you get a bit stuck or a bit lost, bang, you can go back to that spot where you learned it really good. So, you know, and it helps you learn the kind of the finger shape of the melody, you know, if you're doing it in the one spot. If you're doing my advice, that exercise I talk about, the finding melodies, you know, that should, if you practice that enough, you'll be able to, once you know the melody in your ear, and you've been listening to it a lot, I'm sure, so you know what it sounds like, you will be able to just play the melody anywhere on the neck anyway, so you don't have to worry about it. But in those first stages, especially when you're first getting into jazz and you're still working on your ear, and, you know, learn it in one place and learn it really well. Practice the finger movements and get really confident with that melody there in the one spot. As I mentioned before, I'm going to, in the lessons I do of standards, I'm going to show you a set place to play the melody, which you can learn, because I know a lot of you guys don't read music and don't read notation. If you're getting into jazz, it is something that you probably want to consider, is starting to learn a bit about note reading as well, because it's a pretty useful, kind of essential skill if you want to start playing jazz, really. So learning that melody is really important. If you've got a looper or something like that, it's a good idea to practice playing the chords and then playing that melody over the top of the chords. So you're starting to really hear the relationship between the melody and the chords. Alternatively, you could be playing along with an original recording. You know, if you're learning All Blues or Blue in Green or one of the songs off Kind of Blue, you know, maybe you want to play along with the actual recording. That would be a really good idea. So just, you know, making it relative, making the melody relative to chords is what I'm talking about. That's the important part of, you know, learning the melody. We're up to stage 4 now, which is harmonic analysis. And harmonic analysis is a pretty big deal, really. Basically, it's understanding the harmonic movements of a song. So understanding all the chords and the melody and how they relate to each other, what scales you're going to play over what chords when you're improvising. It's a very, very important part of jazz, because jazz is kind of all about improvising, and it's a really important stage in your kind of development as a musician, because once you get handy at harmonic analysis, you can apply it to other stuff like blues and country, and you know, you can take the understanding of the chord progressions and how the harmony's working and what scales and arpeggios you might be using, and apply it to any style, which is one of the things about jazz that it's a really useful, even if you don't want to play jazz, if you never want to be a jazzer. You know, I'm definitely not a jazz guitar player. I love playing jazz as my little kind of hobby thing, but the main reason I learned jazz is because it gives me a really good understanding of other music as well, and composition, and when I'm writing tunes or whatever. So harmonic analysis is something I'm going to go through with you when each time when we do a jazz song. I'm going to explain a little bit of harmonic analysis and try and get more complicated as I do, you know, more complicated tunes. But basically, you're not going to be able to do it unless you have a really solid understanding of basic music theory. So if you don't understand what chords are in what keys, at the very least, and what the notes are in different keys, and how they relate to each other, and how a chord is structured, like root third, fifth, flat seven, that kind of thing, then you really need to go and check out my music theory book, which is downloadable. You have to pay for it. It's on the website. It's called Practical Music Theory. Okay, I think it's a really good basic theory book, and if you don't understand at least all of that stuff, you're going to find harmonic analysis very difficult. So go and check that out. I've got some lessons on the website that explain stuff like secondary dominance with, you know, diminished substitutions and stuff like that, but I'm going to go through some of that with in the lessons as I go along. But harmonic analysis is a really big deal, and something that you need to spend a little bit of time on as you learn each tune, understanding the form. So that would be part 4 of learning your jazz standard. Part 5. Really big deal again here, and this is transcribing. Now, the reason transcribing is so important, particularly solos for a tune. So every time I learn a new jazz standard, I learn the chords, I learn the melody, I understand the harmony that's going on in my harmonic analysis, and then I start transcribing solos. So no matter what the song is, I want to find at least 4 or 5 different solos, different versions of the song, and transcribe, like use my ear to figure out the solos that are being played, and I write them all down. I write them normally, jazz I write in notation, so blues and rock I write in tab, but jazz I tend to write out in notation, partly because I'm often transcribing other instruments other than guitar. So I might be writing out a sax solo or a piano solo, and of course writing out a tab is kind of irrelevant. It's not like I'm writing down exactly where the note was played, which is what I'm doing when I'm writing a tab out. I'm just writing down what the notes are. So that's why I tend to use notation. If you don't write notation, then write it out in tab, that's fine too. If you write notation, it's a lot easier to analyze the notes later on. That's the reason, another reason why writing a solo out in notation is a good idea. But what you get from transcribing, not only you'll learn some licks that'll work great in the song, but it'll also give you a lot of clues for the harmonic analysis. So you'll be able to examine what scales and what arpeggios the improviser was using over those chord changes. So it gives you some ideas of things that you might want to try out in your own improvisations. And it also gives you often clues to maybe, particularly if it's a transcription of whoever wrote the song, it gives you a better understanding of maybe what they meant when they were writing the tune. Like they'll directly be showing you, this is the scale sound that I thought would be good when I wrote the tune. You don't have to stick to it, but it's a good place to start. You know, particularly, you know, sometimes minor chords can have a few different possibilities. You might be able to get away with using the Aeolian mode, the Dorian mode, either of those things, or you know, maybe a harmonic minor or a melodic minor might fit over it. So which one am I going to use? You know, sometimes there's a rule, sometimes there's a bit of jazz theory you have to learn that tells you which scale to use, but sometimes you just have to use your ear and figure out which one sounds good. When you're transcribing, sometimes it can give you a clue as to what the original composer intended, and or it can just give you some ideas. You'll go, wow, George Benson was tearing it up when he was using the harmonic minor scale over that E minor chord there in that song, or you know, that kind of thing. It can give you a bit of an idea of something that you should try out anyway. So transcribing, I think, is a really good thing. Transcribing little chord movements is a good idea as well. Sometimes you'll hear different chord substitutions later on, probably not for beginners, but later on you'll start to hear some of the chords that have been substituted for other chords, and you can transcribe those. That's a really good thing. Also, when you're transcribing, because you're listening to a song a lot, you'll probably absorb some of the time feel as well. Like you'll pick up on the feeling of jazz, which I mentioned before about, you know, when I was a rock guitar player trying to learn from the book. You know, one of the things I missed out on when I was listening to when I should have been listening to the songs, was the feel, that, you know, really picking up on the swing and how it feels to play that song. So that's a, you know, a pretty big deal. And the last stage, God, I'm doing a lot of talking in this lesson. The last stage would be practice. Now, when it comes to practicing jazz, it's a really, really big open space. It's not like when you learn an Eric Clapton tune or whatever, and you learn the song and you practice up that solo and you learn that solo and then you're kind of done. In jazz, it's a lot bigger than that, because you're looking at loads of different types of chord substitutions. You're looking at exploring how you play the different chords. It's not like you're doing it the same way. I'm sorry, I'm picking on Eric Clapton. I'm sorry, I don't mean anything bad, Eric. You know, you play different chords too. But in jazz, there's lots of, if it says C, you might be playing C, C major 7, C6 9, C major 6, all over the neck in lots of different places, and it's a lot more about how you interpret the song in jazz. So it's a, you know, there's a lot more to explore basically. So you should be spending a lot of time exploring the rhythm, the way that you play the rhythm, the chords that you play, the chord substitutions that you play. Then you should be looking at using only arpeggio notes, only scale notes, how you link the arpeggios together, how you link the scales together. If you do superimposed scales or arpeggios where you use slightly different one than might be expected, it's really so big. It's such a big area that basically I think you can play jazz forever and still keep exploring even a simple song, because there are so many different avenues to explore. And you know, it's quite intellectual jazz, and there's a lot of kind of numbers games that you can apply to a standard to try and find new melodies, to find new paths. It's a fascinating world, the jazz world. It's one that I really enjoy it as a hobbyist jazz player. You know. It's fascinating, and it's limitless. You know, I find it a little bit scary actually, how far you can take it, and you know, the amount of study that you can do on things, and still have plenty more to do, which is a beautiful thing. You know, another important part of your study as well should be learning songs in different keys. So when you learn a tune the first time, I'd recommend learning the common key that you find in the real book, because other beginner players will have learnt it in that key too, so it means that you can jam straight away. But very often in a real life jazz you know, if you go to a jam night at a jazz club, you're kind of expected to be able to play the tunes in different keys as well. So not everyone plays Autumn Leaves in G minor or C minor or whatever. They'll be in, you know, they might go, oh, let's do Autumn Leaves in E flat minor today, and you know, it'd be kind of expected, if you're a competent jazz musician, that you can do that. And you know, it's something I work on. Most of the jazz tunes I play in the regular keys, the common keys, and that's where I practice them most of the time, because I'm not really a particularly accomplished jazz musician. But you know, that's really something that you should at least spend some time doing. I definitely do it with the easier tunes that I play. I work on playing them in other tunes. It kind of opens them up, makes them sound different. It makes your chord choices a little different, and the way that you play the scales seems different as well. It's definitely a lot to be said for learning songs in different keys. So that would be something that I would definitely recommend putting on your list. You know, I think I talked about many of the other things, but it's really so wide open, the possibilities there. So hopefully this is still making sense and I haven't scared you off. But it's a really, really rewarding thing, learning jazz tunes. But you want to make sure that you do it good, you know. And you're much better off, in my opinion, having 5 or 6 jazz tunes, or even one jazz tune, that you can play well and that you understand the harmonies for, and you can play confidently from memory the chords and the melody. I think that's a lot more important than kind of being able to blag your way through a whole bunch of tunes. You know, definitely if I'm having a jam with someone, I'd rather play with somebody who can play one tune really well in one key, you know, so at least we can have a bit of a go at playing the tune together, than somebody who's kind of half learned about 100 jazz songs that can't really play any of them all of the way through, or muffs up the changes all the time, or whatever, you know. So if you know one tune well, you can have a jam with someone, you know, but if you know 50 tunes badly, it's going to be pretty difficult. And because jazz is an improvised form, that's something that you want to, you know, bear in mind. So as you can see, I've done a lot of talking this lesson. You can understand why I don't want to have to do all of that talking every time I learn a jazz standard. So I hope you'll join me for learning some of them. I'll be doing the chords and the melody and the harmonic analysis in separate videos, because I think each one of those things is something that you want to check out. As far as the listening goes, like I said, I'm going to put a little list of recommended versions, but of course you can listen to whatever versions you like. You might not have the same taste as me as to which ones, versions of which songs you really like, and let me know if you find a version that's particularly fantastic that I might not know about. It'd be much appreciated. So I hope that helps you learning your jazz tunes, and more information of course is on the website. The list of what I've just talked about and a bit more is on there in the jazz section. So I'll see you for plenty more lessons, guitar and jazz and all sorts of stuff very soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye bye.